My name's Carmen Ellsbrock. I'm a native New Mexican. I've lived in Santa Fe for probably about 55 years. I was raised in Albuquerque. And we had a pharmacy here on the plaza where Haagen-Dazs is now. It was called Zook's. And as I was instructed to say, I made my share of lime cokes. But I'm here this afternoon, and I'm very proud to introduce to you my cousin's daughter. So we are second cousins. And her name is Toni Michnovicz Gibson. And she's here to tell you all about her dad and his role in the Los Alamos startup and all that went on up there. And I think it's very appropriate at the moment with the Oppenheimer movie out and everyone very interested, and it's kind of bringing back old memories. But anyway, that's my story, and I would like to introduce you to Toni Michnovicz Gibson, my second cousin.
Hello, Santa Fe. Welcome to Living Santa Fe and today's show. I want to thank Carmen Ellsbrock for helping me get this organized. For about the past several months, I've been trying to find somebody here in Santa Fe that worked up in Los Alamos, that was one of the workers, not a scientist, not some brainiac from Europe, but somebody that actually worked during the Manhattan Project. And Carmen said, I've got a cousin, and she wrote a book about her father. And that would be Toni, now I'm going to screw this up sure as hell.
Go right ahead.
Toni Michnovicz.
That's a pretty close guess.
Well,
Michnovicz.
Okay. Well, I grew up with Polish people in Colorado when I was a young girl, so I learned how to pronounce all the names. But this one kind of caught me.
Yeah.
Now, she's written a book. She and her brother, John, have written a book called Los Alamos 1944 to 1947. I've lived here most of my life, here in Santa Fe, and I remember having to go through the gates with identification. I was very young at the time, and I remember that like it was yesterday. And I've kept up with this because I did meet several scientists up there when I was young. In fact, one of them, by the name of Harlow Russ, wrote a book. He signed it and he gave it to me, and of course I lost it immediately. But I have kept up with Los Alamos for many years now. And I went to see Oppenheimer. I recommend it highly.
As do I.
And the other show that I recommend is on PBS in the American Experience section of PBS. That is a wonderful documentary on Oppenheimer. So today we're going to discuss this book, and I could not put it down. Once I got started, I was not aware of a lot of things. This is about your dad's activities up in Los Alamos.
Yes, he was actually trained as a scientist.
And he was a photographer.
And he got to the project after being part of the Army Specialized Training Program. At that point, they were sending soldiers who qualified, who had some background. He was sent to University of Michigan, University of Maryland, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia University. And then the Army decided to stop the program because they needed infantrymen in Europe. But he was at the tail end, and he was able to finish that program. And then he was assigned to Manhattan. And when the train was going west, he didn't understand why he was not going to New York City. So he got out to, it would have been Lamy, because it was the train, and got off the train and was put on a bus and taken up the hill and became part of the Manhattan Project. But his training, he had an engineering, physics, and chemistry background. But he had also had a year and a half of college at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois, where he did photography for more of a hobby. He did the yearbook photos, and he did social events, he did sports events, he did dances, and he had done some photography in high school as well. So when you came to the project, your service record was checked to see what skills you had. And people had a variety of skills. They saw his photography skills, and they assigned him right away to the photographic group. So he actually did not stay a scientist here. He became a photographer.
He was also a social director.
Well, what he was a very friendly, outgoing person who was a big man, and he had a big personality. So he was doing photographs now. He did not take the technical pictures of any bomb explosions, of any kinds of testing kinds of things. He was asked to document the project. This was a secret town. So, you know, people came and went, letters came and went, but everything was secret. So he was taking pictures of where they ate, where they got their gas, their beauty shop, their social events, their churches. But he realized, and he asked permission for this, he realized that he had an accordion back home in Illinois, and he was given permission to have his parents send him his accordion. And as soon as that got here, then he was now a photographer and a scientist and a musician and
The
an
music
entertainer.
brings people together.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I went through all the chapters. There are 7 chapters in here. It starts off with the the normal introductions, but then it goes into the 7 different chapters.
Correct.
And the first one is Up on the Hill. Now, tell us a little bit about what you found in his photos. Up on the Hill, this would have been in the 1943.
Correct.
He was 19 years old.
And actually, he got here early 1944.
Okay.
But he was born in the year of 1923 at the very end of the year. So by 44, he would have been 20.
20. He's just a young man. And he's pulled up into Los Alamos.
Correct. So Up the Hill is part of how I came to even be interested in this. So this generation had so many experiences that they didn't talk about.
That's right.
And my dad would be included in that group. And we all knew he was in Los Alamos. We all knew he met my mom in Los Alamos. We all knew she worked in Los Alamos. And that was about it. He didn't really talk that much about it. In the late 90s, I was at White Sands National Monument Park with several of my nephews and our 2 daughters, so the kids could see this. And we went into the gift shop, and I picked up a book called Standing By and Making Do. And it's a memoir of several different wives that wrote their experiences. And then this was compiled, and it was published. And I was just looking at the book and flipping through it, and there was a photo there that seemed really familiar to me. I knew I'd seen it somewhere. And so I bought the book, and I brought it home, and that photo is the road up the hill. And that photo was right in the hallway of my house that I grew up in, that I've been walking back and forth past this photo. But, you know, by that point in time, I was, you know, I went to college and wanted to get out of town, so I left. But I took the book to my dad, and I said, "This is so familiar. You took this photo. It's right here." He said, "Yes." And then he flipped through the book, and he marked all the other photos he had taken. Many other photos of the women hanging up their clothing on the line with their trailers that were there, and their latrine building is there, and they're standing in mud. You know, that's what he was documenting. So going up the hill was, you know, about this whole project and what it was like for these people to come in and have to go through the gate and identify themselves and become familiar with where they were going to live and where could they actually eat, and you know, what was this this land around them that was so foreign. A lot of these people were coming from the Northeast and the Midwest and California, so it was really a new experience for all of them.
Some of the photos in that first chapter are wonderful. It shows Ottawa Bridge,
Right?
which there was a book written about that,
Right,
and a
right.
movie is going to be made of
Is
that.
that right?
In fact,
Okay.
they had a program here at La Fonda the other day.
Interesting.
And the director was here. He said he never even knew where New Mexico was until he saw the Ottawa Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And he wondered why a woman would come out here in the 1930s to live
Right,
in
yeah.
this god-awful country up here.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it was rugged. It still
was.
is rugged.
Yes, it is.
And it shows pictures of Bandelier and Frijoles Canyon,
And Valle Grande and Black Mesa.
Valle Grande. In fact, I just got back from fishing at Valle Grande. It's great fishing.
Excellent.
Okay, the next chapter is Home on the Hill. Now that shows some of the buildings that were there prior to
Correct.
the Manhattan Project. You want to talk a little bit about that?
That's an interesting one of Fuller Lodge, isn't it?
It is, yes.
First of all, it's surrounded by space. Secondly, there are no extensions that were put onto it, and it's just a beautiful photo. The one below the big house, that was the dorm for the ranch school boys. But they had the radio station in there, the Red Cross in there, parts of other kinds of functions that they were doing. And then the trading post, which they used as a sort of a small post exchange. But some of these living conditions were primitive, really.
Absolutely.
Primitive. And I will say, in the Oppenheimer movie, which is so good, I'm so glad I've seen it 3 times, it's almost a narrow scope of what the town looked like, and they really couldn't recreate the housing.
No.
But it doesn't even look as big as it actually was. And these hutments, lots of trailers, living room trailers.
Yes.
Expandable trailers that, part of it. There was a lot of Army issue types of buildings that were brought here, some from Hanford, Washington, and then the dorms started going up. And they just had lots of dorms. They have barracks for the soldiers, but they had dorms, they had women here. And I remember my mom saying that she got here later, I think actually in 45. But some of these dorms were still being constructed then. And she remembers that, there would be buildings next to buildings, and the building next to the building where she was being constructed, and there was nothing on the windows, and the workers were peering into the windows, and she said, how dare they, Why are they looking at us that way?
They were women.
Exactly.
And you had wax.
Right, yeah.
With the military men,
Sure.
they had the women's dorm and
That's
the men's
correct.
dorm. And
They also had the women's where they ate their meals, and the men's. The women had a separate one, but the women liked to go into the men's.
well, naturally, that's what it's all about.
It was more fun with them. And one whack was quoted as saying, "I'll just overlook the silverfish and the roaches, and just so I can eat here with these guys."
Sure,
So,
I could see how that
yeah.
happened. Chapter 3 was the life in the secret town. They had a post office, and the post office was, you couldn't just send anything out.
Nope.
Everything had to be checked. It was that secret.
Sure. And blacked out or cut out if they didn't want you to say anything. And they had Post Office 1663. That was where many people were born, is Post Office 1663.
Right.
But they also added Post Office 180, and then there was another in 15, I can't remember. But so they had so many people here.
Oh yeah,
that they
people started coming
They
in.
had to constantly add
I can't
facility.
even imagine bringing a person that had a PhD in all these chemistry and everything coming up here, bringing their wives with them. Their
Sure,
wives
sure.
probably said, "My God, what did
Yeah.
I marry here?"
Well, and the wives were really important too.
Absolutely.
They were put to work not just in a capacity of, sort of menial skills. They were all, not all, but many of them were well educated, and they were computing, and when computing was punching in cards, and
Yes.
things like that.
And the cooking facilities, they had a kitchen, and they hired a lot of locals from the San Ildefonso Pueblo,
Right.
Española,
Yes.
to come up, and they were all uniformed.
And that was mostly in Fuller Lodge. That was the fine dining.
Oh, that was
That
the fun-
required the reservation, and that was nicer. The PX, where they could go and buy toiletries and things like that, also had a little, almost a soda fountain thing. And my dad and my mom used to talk about loving their fried egg sandwiches. And so that was a good memory for them.
50 cents for breakfast and $1.15 for dinner.
Right, right.
What a deal.
Well, it was a different
A
time,
little
wasn't
different
it?
today.
Yeah.
Okay, when you get a group of people together, no woman's going to do without a hairdresser. No woman's going to do without a manicurist. I mean, I don't care if they live up on top of a mountain. That has got to be. Men need haircuts.
Correct. Yeah, yeah.
So they got
They had a
barber
barber
shops.
shop, a beauty shop. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got some pictures here of an old car. Well, it wasn't old for that day, but they had stopped making cars
Yeah,
because of the
correct.
war effort.
True.
But this one was up there. They had to have a service station to put gas in.
There was lots of traveling up and down the hill constantly. Yeah, so
I
there
know.
were cars here.
In fact, we're here at a place right now where they spend a lot of time.
Yeah, they did.
FBI was all over this hotel. They were posed as valets, as waitresses, as cooks, just in case anybody had too many martinis.
And they were watching people, listening for people.
Listening to
Creating
everything.
stories for people to say what you're doing. And they used to call, I know my parents said that we were making windshield wipers for submarines. That's what we were telling people. That's what the secret project was.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't even make sense, but
Yeah.
it was a good story.
It was a good story.
Correct.
They had classrooms for kids. I imagine the wives took over those
Yep,
areas.
that was a lot of the women did do the teaching. There was the theory that all these children would be brilliant because they're the children of scientists, but they found out that these were kids.
They're kids.
And they needed, just like every other kid, they needed some structure and some discipline and some love.
And they had church services for
They had
everybody.
Theater 1 and Theater 2,
Theaters.
big buildings, so they'd have church in the morning, and then all these benches could be moved, and there was your dance floor.
Wonderful. I can just imagine how those people, I mean, it was such a wonderful director doing it, Oppenheimer. I mean, this man wasn't only a scientist, but he was a
Yeah.
hell of a director. To get this program going and to make it work.
And keep it going.
And keep it quiet.
Yeah. And they wanted the scientists to keep working, and they knew they couldn't work them 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So that's why they wanted to have some recreation.
Yeah, some fun.
Here, because they just couldn't leave the site easily. They would go down and go shopping, but they just couldn't leave the site easily.
And Santa Fe was small. I mean, really
Yes,
small back
yes,
then.
yeah, not
And
like
I'm
it
sure
is
the
now.
gossip just, I mean, it goes
Sure.
around today. You say one thing and it's all over town.
And you would know that. You live here, so.
Oh, my God, yes. But also the fact that at that time it was very even smaller.
Yes,
And they
for
had
sure.
a bohemian group here. and
Yes.
Very interesting people. They had a town dog.
Yeah, how about that? Timoshenko.
I love it.
Isn't that interesting?
And he just spent the night with whomever was
right,
nicest to him.
he was known, and if you read other Manhattan Project books, you will find references to him. That
Just an old
he just
mutt.
knew- it is an old mutt.
Well, he looks like he might be part Russian,
yeah, wolfhound.
wolfhound, and
I
God
don't know.
only knows
Yeah.
what else. Now let's get into your dad's work, the photo lab.
Okay,
It was a group of men.
correct.
How many?
Maybe 8 maybe 8 altogether. When he arrived here, there was a director, Mr. Keller, a civilian. And so Dad arrived early in 44. So the project was, you know, just coming from the ground up. So everything before that was just getting built. They were probably bringing the trailers in and setting up some of this stuff. So they were building the technical area, surrounding it with fencing and with barbed wire. So they were setting up, you know, in the canyon, some of the experimental places. So that's what was going on. So when he came, Mr. Keller was the head of this. And so my dad came, a couple of other guys came, Joe Gluth and Elmer Donor. Elmer Donor was actually a driver who drove trucks of plutonium. And Joe Gluth was, they were part of the Provisional Engineering Detachment, the PED. And my dad was part of the Special Engineering Detachment, the SEDs. So the PEDs were a little bit lower, and they would do more of the grunt work, you might say. But both of these men were folded into the photographic group. There was a George Kochnick, Stan Zimbati, you know, and then there was kind of a little bit of a support staff, administrative, secretarial kind of a staff. It was a pretty small group. So
now, this technical area was close to the Ashley Pond. And I'm trying to picture it in my head.
Well,
Where
it was actually sort of north, kind of northwest of the pond. You know, when you see Ashley Pond and you think of that, you think that it's kind of going around. And there's a picture in there of the tech area and the pond and some ducks walking around. But you know, at that time, it was not right there in that center. It was kind of on the other side of the pond.
Okay.
Not that close to Bathtub Row.
Yeah.
And Fuller Lodge.
Yes.
Yeah. But it was still close. I mean, it was kind of concentrated in that area.
The women actually, these WACs that came in, I mean, they were techs too, a lot of them.
Yeah, but they were everything. Some of them were techs, yeah. Some of them were
telephone operators?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, public service announcers. Some of them were in the medical, the field. You know, they did a lot of different things.
And of course, then we have Mr. Oppenheimer.
Yes.
Who ran the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah. And you have Leslie R. Groves, who
Correct.
actually, General
Groves,
brought
yes.
Oppenheimer in.
Correct.
What attracted him to Oppenheimer?
You know, that's
Besides
such a good
his-
question. I mean, it was a lot of different things.
I mean, they're opposites. You got military
Yes.
with civilian, with scientists.
Groves was frustrated with his, you know, his dismissive nature, and, you know, not following the Army structure and his kind of elite attitude. But he knew he was the top theoretical scientist. You know,
Yeah.
Oppenheimer wasn't doing the, you know, the experimental physics. He wanted to be a theoretician. And how can you create this idea to create this explosion, to create this bomb, without somebody who can work out the theory of how to get there? So Groves knew that. And, you know, Oppenheimer turned out to be a good administrator, too.
Absolutely.
So it
when
was
you read this book, you can see it. You can see what
Right,
his
right.
hand was in everything.
Sure, sure. Now this is, the picture of Oppenheimer is really interesting, because this is not the one. There's the one that you see in every book, the one where Oppenheimer is kind of looking to the side.
Yes.
That's in every single book. The credit for that photo is given generally to the Los Alamos National, yeah, that's the one, either to the lab or to the Historical Society. So my dad took that picture. He took 4 photos. He told me, because I sat down with him when I started this project and did audio recordings of him. There was a time between the creation of this bomb and the Trinity test. There was about a couple of week period. and the lab, the whole project knew that once the Trinity test happened, they would need to have some public relation information ready. So he sent my dad, or sent Oppenheimer into the photo lab for a photo shoot. So he did 4 different pictures with his face in different ways. This is the one that's in all the books. The one that I put in this book, though, there's Oppenheimer that has a slight smile. And if you look at his tie, and it's in this one too, but if you look at his tie here, it's very off-center. Mm-hmm. But my dad said, I learned from Joseph Karsh, who was another well-known, who did Churchill and, you know, all these famous portraits of famous people. And he said Joseph Karsh was of the attitude toward your subject that you don't touch your subject, because he really thought his tie should be straightened, but he knew that that was really not appropriate to touch the subject. So he just took his picture.
Yeah,
so,
that's what he was.
Yeah, yeah.
Oppenheimer probably could have cared less about his tie.
I'm sure he could have cared less. But as a photographer, you know, you have your eye and you see something.
Sure, I get it, yeah. And then there's a photo here of Enrico Fermi.
Right, yeah.
Now, he escaped fascism.
He did,
He was an Italian scientist. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He and Oppenheimer were pretty close, weren't they?
They were close. There were just, you know, so many people. And Fermi actually worked in Chicago, but he did come out to the project. And his granddaughter, whose name is Rachel Fermi, published a book about 20 years ago called Picturing the Bomb. And she traveled to Albuquerque and spent many hours with my dad and got some of his pictures and put them in her book. So she has also carried on a family legacy, you know, of talking about her dad's work.
There's a photo in here. He's standing next to a guy with a broom.
Right, right, yeah.
And the man was from Espanola Valley.
Right. He was their janitor.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and you got a good picture of him.
Sure, and see, here's Joe Gluth, who was the guy in the Provisional Engineering Detachment, who became a photographer. But these guys are photographers, so they're taking pictures of everything. And here's Elmer Donor with his truck.
Yes.
On one of his trips to move plutonium.
And here's a guy they called Old Grandpa that looks like he was
Old Grandpa.
a distillery guy, you know, in the Appalachian Mountains, but he was dressed that way because
he was another maintenance guy.
Yeah, he was dealing with some of the stuff he had to be very careful with.
Well, yes, and he, you know, or fixing things, and so it's for us to imagine what life was like back then is really tough, because the day-to-day stuff. What do you do? You know, there are pictures of. It's not in the book, but some of their water pipes freezing.
Oh.
They were getting water from Frijoles Canyon, you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always clean, and it sometimes arrived with nothing in it. You know, it was daily inconveniences, but there was a spirit of, you know, we are all in this together. But it was not always like that. These women really did stand in mud to hang their clothes out on a clothesline.
Now, the picture that I found fascinating, he's dressed in medical gear.
Correct.
2 people were exposed to
radiation.
Mm-hmm. And they died.
They both died, correct.
And he filmed the autopsy.
Correct.
And filmed the illness.
Yes, he did. So Louis Hempelman was a doctor here. He was a radiologist here. And when Louis Slotin was exposed in the canyon, and when they were doing that experiment, tickling the dragon, and you know, something fell away, and then the critical mass came together for a very brief moment, and you know, and it was stopped. He was exposed to severe radiation, and it didn't take long until he was, you know, in the hospital. So they knew that, this radiologist knew that as they experimented with this new science, there were consequences. So he had Dad suit up in that medical gear and take pictures. I have not, there is one picture in the Rachel Fermi book that Rachel Fermi probably got from the, some of the medical articles that were written of the arm that's severely burned, but I don't have any of those pictures.
Well, that must have been something your dad never forgot.
Yes, I'm sure you're right, yeah.
Then you still had the chapter 5. That's when people started to got to know each other, obviously.
Sure.
Dancing, romancing, and more.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
people became very friendly with each other, I guess.
There were many opportunities to do so. I think many spouses encountered each other on the project. New friends became
friends.
spouses.
Yeah. And Los Cuatros, that was one of the bands that they started with your dad in it.
Yep. So he started with some of his buddies, and none of the other guys were photographers. There was a big band.
The Keynotes.
Mm-hmm. They had a big band here, so they all did different events, different evenings. When part of the Los Cuatros, some of those people were discharged from the Army, and they would leave, people left and went back home to their lives, or their wives, or their families, and so Dad and these other musicians would find replacements, so they were doing the 4 Jacks. There's the 4 Jacks, so that was his other one. Then those
very good-looking men, incidentally. I was born too late.
Well, yep, no going back
gosh.
there. And there's the Jammick Trio. So it was just, musical chairs changing and finding a new band member.
A lot of fun and a lot of, I hate to say it, but a lot of drinking too.
Oh my gosh.
The beer.
Oh my goodness. There were just thousands of cases of beer that arrived here regularly.
When the government puts something together, they do it right.
They have access.
Yeah, it has
Yeah.
great pictures of them here.
Sure.
Picnics.
Yes.
I can imagine some of those people had never been in the mountains, and to be up in that country,
Right.
at that time, it was pristine.
It was pristine. You're right. They would go into Pouillet Cliffs, which now is, you don't just go into it now. They had access to a lot that is now much more carefully cared for and monitored.
I play golf, and Carmen plays golf. We play golf together. We have a beautiful golf course. We have 2 of them here that are really nice. I look at this one in Los Alamos. They were playing off of dirt.
They're on dirt, yeah. The western area, it's those are houses they must be, close to 75 years old
Yes,
now. A lot of them have been remodeled and expanded and different things. But that was the first housing development in Los Alamos where people could own the home. But there's a picture of that. It's just a wide open
space.
Basically a dirt area.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where they played golf.
And they had a football team. They had a baseball team. Skating.
Yeah.
They made their own ski run.
Yeah. They built the ski run here. Yeah, they built it. They took down trees. They built that ski run, yeah.
And of course, then the marriages. It's got pictures of all these marriages.
Yeah, he did personal photos for people. His group of friends would ask, would you do my family? Would you do the baptism? Would you do the wedding? So he did a lot of other personal photography.
The thing that interested me so much too was the fact their outside life. Of course, it was in Santa Fe quite a bit. And they went to San Ildefonso.
Right.
The Native Americans invited them in.
They did.
And looking through it, I see Popo Vida, who was a famous artist here.
Yeah.
His mother was Maria Martinez, who was a potter. And there are pictures of her.
Yeah.
Hopi dances. They entertained all that group from Los Alamos.
They had an interesting cultural exchange. It's so interesting to think about this right now. And the San Ildefonso people did their demonstration of their dancing.
Yes.
And then the Los Alamos people did their demonstration, and asked all these people to dance with him of square dancing. And so my dad was there taking photos, but this is his accordion right here.
Oh.
So when he was done with the photography, he picked up his accordion and he became the music for the square dancing, because he played by ear. So he could play polkas, he could play dance music, and he could play the very steady beat of a square dance piece. So he was pretty versatile.
Oh my gosh. Well, those pictures are great.
Yeah, they're very fun.
And the women dancing.
Right.
With,
yeah, and
with
there's
the San Ildefonsos.
And there's Maria.
Yeah,
Martinez.
Maria.
Yeah.
She was a young woman then. Look at her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here are all the churches around here. Now, the bomb was exploded July of 1945.
Right. That was the Trinity test.
The Trinity test. Okay. Then after that, the first bomb was dropped on Hiroshima.
Yeah.
And what was the date on that?
August 6th.
August 6th. Yeah.
And then 3 days later, August 9th, was Nagasaki.
Now, Mr. Oppenheimer was a sensitive man. That had to have bothered him.
He had the mind to create something from a theory into what turned out to be a treacherous reality.
Yeah.
And he knew it. And if he hadn't done it, somebody else would have.
Well, Einstein warned FDR at that time.
Yeah.
He said, if you don't do something, the enemy's going to do it to you.
And those times, we can't even go back. We know now, seeing pictures and hearing testimonials of how people survived the war in Europe and how so many people were murdered, brutalized.
Millions were genocide.
Yeah, so we know that now, but for them, it was a threatening time. It was a threatening time, it really was, yeah.
So when they finally, the war ended and D-Day came along, we were through with the war. How did they honor all these people up in Los Alamos? I know there are award ceremonies, there were parades.
This one is interesting. This was the Army-Navy E Award. So that's a very top award.
Explain that.
And so they set up this entire platform on the side of Fuller Lodge where the parking lot isn't, the other side where the lawn is. And they hung flags and buntings and banners. And then all of the population came and stood on the grass. And this was a project that was basically contracted by UC Berkeley. And the president of the college was there, and Groves was there, and Oppenheimer was there. And there were civilians there that were presented awards, and there were scientists that were presented. There was military there represented. So it was a big deal, the Army-Navy E Award, and that was another job my dad had, to photograph. He was still in the Army then, and so that was his assignment. He and Joe Gluth. So if he's in a picture there, then Joe Gluth took a picture of him, and they would trade off.
What's with all the cigarette smoking and the pipes? I remember that.
That was a different day too.
Yeah.
Yep, that was a different day.
But they were honored in many ways, and still are being honored, which they should be. I mean, that was an unbelievable time. Going through this, I saw some pictures. One was Linda Darnell.
Yeah, and you have a recollection of that, correct?
I do.
Tell
She
me.
was here in Santa Fe. See, I heard all the mitote, the gossip, going around back in those days.
Yeah.
Linda Darnell visited Santa Fe quite often. Now, I don't know why, but she did. And she ended up meeting
Bradbury.
Norris Bradbury.
Right, who is now the second director.
He was the second
Right,
director
right.
of the Atomic Energy Commission.
Well, of the Manhattan Project, which is now becoming the Los Alamos Laboratory,
Yes.
not National Laboratory. You know, it had several iterations. But yeah, so she came up to visit.
Don't you know that was a thrill for everybody?
Oh, I'm
'Cause
sure.
she was drop dead gorgeous.
Yeah, yeah.
She had just finished making Forever Amber.
Okay.
I call it Forever Under.
Okay. I don't have to think too hard about that one, I'm sure.
It was a good movie. I was just a kid when I read the book.
Yeah.
Santa Fe Fiesta, which is no
Yes,
longer like it
yes,
used to
yes,
be.
yes.
What a ball.
Now, do you see La Fonda in the background of any of these? Because I can't really tell.
Well,
It looks like, you know, Palace of the Governors,
here's
perhaps.
the Faith Cafe. I remember the Faith
Yeah,
Cafe.
yeah.
And I'm sure La Fonda's in here.
Yeah,
That's
well,
it.
I have a lot of pictures of this fiesta. I'm going to go back and look at them and
Yeah,
see.
and the historical parade.
Right, yeah,
They
yeah.
made fun of everything.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they made fun of Los Alamos
Sure,
and
sure,
everybody, all
sure,
the
yeah.
politicians.
Yeah.
Which was really the way this country should be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We've lost a little bit of that.
We're struggling.
We're
a country that's trying to be diverse and is very diverse, but we don't always have the answers.
That's
we have
right.
a lot of questions.
We do.
Yeah.
Here's a gentleman I remember, Albert Gonzalez.
Oh, the magistrate, yeah.
He was
yeah.
the blind attorney.
Right.
I remember him, he'd walk around town, he had a dog, a seeing eye dog.
Oh, interesting.
And I remember him when I was a kid.
Wow.
I know his daughter.
Wow. Well, she's probably seen that picture.
I doubt it, I don't know, but she will see it because I'm
Yeah.
going to tell her about it.
Okay.
He was put in charge of Los Alamos after the war to maintain order for any
Correct.
type of criminal activity.
Right, yeah.
Which would have been drunken driving and fighting.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, sure.
And the fines were nothing,
Yeah.
$2 to $15, so you had to really do something bad then. But Albert Gonzalez, he
Yeah.
was put in there by the feds.
Right, yeah.
So
yeah.
that was quite an honor.
And before that, it was all military control.
That's
So-
right. Yeah. Now, here's Mr. Edward Teller.
Correct. Yeah.
He's the one that designed and built the hydrogen bomb. He and Mr. Oppenheimer clashed a little bit.
Yeah.
And of course we have Norris Bradbury, who actually
Yes.
be the first
Yeah.
director.
Right.
I was so happy the other day, I was reading the newspaper, and the year's 2023 now. U.S. Secretary Jennifer Granholm didn't mince words when she asked what was led to her decision to restore Oppenheimer's national security clearance. Good for her.
Yes. You know, Jennifer Granholm was the governor of Michigan. And
Yes,
I live in Michigan.
I know.
So I read the New York Times, it was December 22nd, because we get the New York Times, and I opened it up and I read that article. And it shocked me, and I was so relieved. And to realize his security clearance denial was vacated. He didn't get a new security clearance because he can't, because he's not alive anymore. But the denial of his security clearance, that decision was vacated. So it was excised from him and his life. So he was restored.
Yes.
But the author of American Prometheus, Kai Bird, who worked with Martin Sherwin on that book for many years, was the one primarily responsible for that. And that decision did not come easily. He started 10 years before that. So this was 1922. So he started in 2012.
Right.
And he had to go through several administrations. I think he started even before that, with Bush and then with Obama, talking to generally the energy secretary, which is the position that's replaced the Atomic Energy Commission, with the senators from New Mexico. But there was always hesitation to even go to this whole controversy. It was still controversial.
Yes, it
so they
was.
wouldn't do it. So Kai Bird, you know, he had connections. He ended up having a connection to somebody whose father worked in Los Alamos, and you know, they began to get the evidence and the research and the to restore the record. And so Kai Bird finally tried again during the Biden administration, and Jennifer Granholm had pages and pages of proofs and records and research, and Jennifer Granholm read it and she made the decision. And so aren't we lucky?
Takes a woman.
Enough said.
Yes, I was so happy when I saw
Yeah.
that. I remember as a young person, I remember the McCarthy hearings, how they tore people to pieces.
Sure.
And of course, he was one of them that was crucified. Oppenheimer was.
Absolutely.
They called him a communist.
Absolutely.
Everybody knew communists back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
The whole thing was so
It was-
unjust,
it
and
was
it was so
unjust. And it was bad for the
So-
scientists of today.
Yes,
If he
yes.
had not been,
Yeah.
because that's an important thing we've got going
right,
in this
right,
country.
Yeah, we need to really re-examine how we treat science. And of course, there's a lot of controversy still in things that are happening, things that are being discovered, AI and, you know, all DNA and things
Pretty
like
scary.
that. Yes, but it doesn't mean that all science is wrong.
No.
It can't be believed in as a conspiracy theory. So yeah,
Science
that was
has gotten us through a lot. This
It
country
has.
is great.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I was so happy to hear that Mr. Oppenheimer.
Yes.
He was
And of course, that's the crux of the movie, that is exposed for what
I
it
feel
was.
like I feel like I can get into that guy's heart, how he felt. He was so brilliant,
Yeah,
so far ahead of everybody else, and he knew so much more than the average person.
but he was such a deep
But
thinker.
he was a deep thinker.
And he knew that morally, this had not only consequences, but it had questions.
It had questions.
And the questions
still
were
there.
controversial,
Yeah.
and they're still there exactly.
Still there.
Yeah, yeah. So it was good for that movie to tell that part of the story.
Toni, you don't know how much I appreciate you coming on. This
My pleasure.
is a wonderful story. Tell me what you're going to do for your dad. He's going to be 100 years old in December.
Correct.
Except he's passed on.
He's no longer with us, but because he has this birthday, which is kind of hard because it's the day after Christmas, December 26th, and he's 1923 was when he was born, so it's 2023, he would have been 100 years old. Because of the Oppenheimer movie, I just have sort of maybe been inspired once again to go back and look at his record. Much of his work I've already given to the Los Alamos Historical Society archives. That's what he wanted, and I wanted to honor what he wanted. I still have quite a bit, but there's a man behind the photo. So this photo here, which appears in so many books, somebody took that picture. The National Historical, or the Los Alamos National Lab did not take the picture. The Los Alamos Historical Society did not take the picture.
Your dad did.
But this picture is everywhere.
Yeah.
He never got any credit. So the man behind the picture, there's I'm hopefully going to start my next couple of years of work by honoring him with a birthday luncheon, and we're inviting family and friends for this year. And I'm going to have some of his work developed into poster size pictures of the scientists, some of the road up the hill, some other important ones for everybody to see. And then I'm going to begin working with the archives in Los Alamos to hopefully create an installation that will be put in their museum. And who knows, it may end up in the National Nuclear Museum in Albuquerque too.
Absolutely.
To really illuminate the man behind the photo and all the work that he did.
Well, I can't show all the photos because Doreen, who's the operations engineer here, throw me out.
Okay.
But I will get several pictures from
Okay. Sure.
each chapter, and we'll put this on YouTube. I'll put it everywhere I can. We've got a group here in Santa Fe called La Vosas, and they're all Santa Fe people, and they're historians,
Wonderful.
and they're friends of mine. And I'll get that on there.
Okay.
I'll do everything I can because
And when I get this installation of his work done, I'll be sure to let you know, and
I-
maybe we'll talk again.
we will talk again. Yes, I know we will. And we will do as good a job as we can on this. We'll give you a tape and you can put it in the museum and say, here, this is
Okay.
what civilians say.
Okay, wonderful.
Toni,
Thank you so much.
thank you very much. And thank you, Santa Fe.